I felt myself at the edge of the pool floating up, looking at myself, and I saw myself on the bottom of the pool with my little pink cap through the wavy water. And I realized that I was there and my body was there. And, so having that cognition that here's unconsciousness. Now, of course, you can't edit all that's going on or process. I don't even understand these concepts, but I knew it was I and me there floating on the edge of the pool. What I didn't realize was, that I was dying.
I'm here with Scarlett Heinbuch. Scarlett had a childhood near death experience at the young age of 4, in which she was out of her body and felt the love and awareness of the universe. After returning to her life, she found she had a very special gift that she brought back with her. Thank you so much, Scarlett, for being my guest. I'm really excited to spend some time with you today.
Well, thank you, Tia, for having me. I'm also excited to be here today.
You were just a baby. At the age of 4, you had this traumatic experience to your body. Tell me what happened.
I was 4 and it was summertime. I was in we were living in apartments in Maryland there. And my mom had taken us to the neighborhood pool. So it was a hot summer day. My brother was in the wading kiddie pool because he was about 18 months old. And my sister is just a year older. So she was about 5. We're only 13 months apart. And so she and I were in the shallow end of the grown-up pool, and mom was on on the sidelines on one of the chairs, keeping an eye on things. And she was kind of looking at us and looking at my brother over in the kiddie pool. And there was a lifeguard, and it was the middle of the afternoon. So, everything seemed fine. Now, I will qualify. I'm not shy about my age. This was 1964. I had on one of these little pink rubber caps with the scallops on it. And anybody who lived in that period knows what I'm talking about. It pulls your hair, very uncomfortable, but you had to wear those required in pools. So anyway, what's significant about that is as I was in the pool with my sister, I was bobbing in the water. So, but my feet could touch the back, the bottom of the pool, but I was floating backwards with each tap down. Well, I didn't know that, but I didn't really know how to swim either. And I guess I must have gone backward, and then my feet did not tap down. Then I kind of gasped and water went in my mouth. And then I started flailing. And then I kept going back and I kept gulping water and not knowing how to swim. I just kept swallowing water. And then things went black. I remember the chlorine taste in my mouth. I remember the gasping, the feelings of fear. But then I wasn't aware. And then I was. And then I was aware of myself at 4 years old. I felt myself at the edge of the pool floating up, looking at myself, and I saw myself on the bottom of the pool with my little pink cap through the wavy water. And I realized that I was there and my body was there. And so having that cognition that here's unconsciousness. Now, of course, you can't edit all that's going on or process. I don't even understand these concepts, but I knew it was I and me there floating on the edge of the pool. What I didn't realize was, that I was dying, and I just didn't know. So mom at that point, I mean, I could feel this sense of love. I was just surrounded by this incredible love and peace and tranquility that I had never even understood because our life was kind of turbulent, as kids. It's a long story and we'll get into that. But it was just, oh my gosh, it was so wonderful, Tia. I didn't want to come back. It was like, oh, I just want to stay here. But I also was aware of my mother's feelings. Well, mom was looking around. She didn't see my little pink head bobbing around. So she got up and saw me on the bottom of the pool. Now, she's a retired registered nurse. So she jumped into the pool, got me out, and we talked about this just a few years ago. I said, Ma, what happened? And she said, well, when I pulled you out, you were blue and you weren't breathing. And so she flipped me over on my side to get water to come out and started, doing whatever it was she needed to do to revive me. And I also knew too that I had a choice. I knew that I didn't have to come back. I knew I could just go ahead and complete dying, but I wasn't quite there yet. And and I also could feel my mom's feelings and her fear, her panic, her grief. And I felt so bad that she would feel so bad throughout her life that I made a decision to come back. Then I remember the next conscious thought of me floating out there is being on the side of the pool, feeling the cement that was all gritty. I'm throwing up water. It's not pretty. I'm just coughing and choking it out, and that was it. So I survived that. But here's the thing, I didn't realize I'd had a near death experience. Back then, the term had not even been coined. No one knew. And I just knew that, I was out of my body, and I didn't question that. It just happened. So, but what I didn't realize that, because I was so close to death, something happened where that doorway between the worlds stayed open. And so as a little kid, I began to have all these unusual experiences, these intuitions, these knowings of things that were going to happen with my family. Um, you know, I my I knew when somebody was nearby, even if they were across town. Yeah, I had all these abilities to see them with my mind's eye of where, like my uncle, I talk about that experience, and I'm riding somewhere with my parents, and I'm telling them that my uncle is at our house knocking on the door, and they're saying, "No, no, he's not coming by today." And I said, "Well, he's there." And they didn't believe me, and of course, we get home, and there's a note from my uncle, who had popped by. Things like that happened all the time. Now, I couldn't explain how I see with my mind's eye from someplace else, and I didn't know the word for it at that time, but that's just how it was. And then I would see spirits from the other side who would come, and some had really frightening faces, and it was terrifying to me. They would just float around, and I was like, I don't know who these beings are, but they were there for a reason. But again, being a child, I didn't know who to talk to or how to manage any of this. But the thing that came back too was just this incredible sense of compassion and love for people. Mom said I would just love, she said, she could just see I had like this download of love that was so powerful. My whole body would shake with it. I just could not contain it. And I do remember that, just feeling this incredible love and that connection to the universe in that regard, was just stunning, because that's what I was feeling was love. But again, once those doorways open, and not knowing how to filter or protect myself, some of the other things that weren't loving kind of opened too. So it took a long time, Tia, to figure out how to protect myself, and that didn't come till years later. But that experience opened the door to me really knowing without any doubt that there is indeed consciousness outside of the body. And I keep saying this, that I had no doubt about that from 4 years old on because of the experience I had. No one could have prepped me for it or suggested it to me. It's a reality.
When did you realize that you had had a near-death experience? And with that realization, did it change these gifts that you had?
Well, I realized it was a true near death experience, probably about 10 years ago, because I was at a conference for IANS, and PMH Atwater had just published a book about angels on earth, about children under the age of 5 having near death experiences. So I heard her talk, and I was like, just sitting there just stunned. It was like, oh, I didn't even realize it was a near death experience, because you're so young, you don't have the processing skills to understand that this happened to you. So I didn't even know there was a before and after me. It was just me having this experience, and somehow the rest of my life and things that happened afterward were somehow just all part of who I was today. But I didn't necessarily think it was because of that experience. It's just that I was too young. So I'm still in my formulating years. And so when these things happen, I don't necessarily at that time understand that they are directly related to me having the capability of being out of my body through that near death experience. And now I knew after that, it was kind of that moment where you do the look back and realize, oh, Now everything makes sense. Now I understand how I was able to kind of have that outer perceiver who can kind of be out of my body and see things happening somewhere else. I just never connected the dots till then. And it was just such a stunningly eye-opening moment. And yet also one of those ones you pop yourself upside the head and say, how did you not connect that that's a near-death experience? But again, it was because I didn't even think about it as being anything other than just who I was.
You said that you saw some spirits, and some of them may have been a little scary. Were any of them familiar? Did they feel like someone you knew?
Yes. Well, sometimes when I go to sleep at night, I'd see what I'd call the faces, and these would just be scary looking faces of people who looked scary to me. I mean, I didn't know them. But then when someone in my family would die, then I'd get a visit. And that part could be very scary. In fact, I always slept with the light on whenever someone died, because I knew that they'd be coming by. And usually it was just to leave a message. I talk about it in my book, and I've talked about it too, but my aunt, my mother's only sister, died at a very young age from a very aggressive form of breast cancer in 1974, I think it was. And so my mom was a good deal younger than she was. And so she considered her sister kind of like her mom. She raised her because of that big age gap. And mom was one of 7 kids, and her sister was one of the older ones. Mom was the baby. So when she died, mom was grieving really, really hard. And my aunt came to me and said, "Please tell your mom to stop grieving for me. It's holding me back." And when I saw her the first time, she looked frightening to me because she looked like she was kind of decaying, and this was just within a few days of her death. And I remember just being horrified, and it wasn't until years later I learned about the etheric bodies and how sometimes when people have newly died and they're spiritually shifting, that they might show up looking that way, and as they are shifting their things, um their physical to spiritual realms and how we perceive them. So, but it was still scary to me. But in any case, I told my mom about what had happened, and she said, well, she had not mom was always very intuitive, but she said she had not experienced anything nor had any message from her sister, but she was still just crying all the time and really depressed over her sister's death. And then I had a phone call. Now this was the thing, this happened when I was about 16, and this was in the day when they had the rotary phones, the with the dial, again, dating myself, but, and this was in the middle of the afternoon. So again, I had not heard of any of these things, but the phone rang, middle of the afternoon. I'd gotten home from school. I forget where my sister was or my brother, but my parents were at work, so I was home in the house. And when the phone rang, I thought nothing of it, but, we had a party line back then in the rural area where we were growing up. So it wasn't unusual for connections to be kind of poor or whatever. So when I answered the phone, I heard this crackling sound. And I thought, oh, okay, not a great connection. I said hello. And then this crackling sound, and then this delay. And then I heard my aunt's voice say my name. And she said, Scarlett. And I'm like, hello. And she said, this is your aunt. And she said her name. And I said, and I remember just standing there, and my whole body has got goosebumps from head to toe. I'm thinking, my mind is like, I don't know, is someone playing a prank? This cannot be real. I'm feeling that sick pit in my stomach because I'm so scared, and the electrical feeling of just my hair standing up on end, everything. It was just scary. She said, honey, I said, Aunt Marguerite, and was her name. And I said, but you're dead. And she said, I know, honey. She said, but I want you to please tell your mom to stop grieving. I'm okay. I'm okay. And she's holding me back. And so she had repeated that message. Well, I was so freaked out. I slammed down the phone. I don't even know why, but I just ran outside. And I don't even know why, but I just didn't know what to do with the feelings I was having. I just had never had nor heard of that at that time, of a phone call from a deceased person. But it was, like I said, it wasn't a dream. It was the middle of the afternoon. Um, and it made no sense. So, again, I relayed the message to my mother and told her what had happened. And she said, "Well, are you sure you didn't just imagine that?" I said, "Mom, no. I mean, the phone rang and everything." And well, interestingly enough, her mother, who is the mother of my aunt, um, she was Pennsylvania Dutch. And so she had unusual abilities too. So I think there's also a genetic component. But she told my mother the same thing. She called mom and said, "Hey, I want you to know something. Your sister came to visit me." And this was at her home. And she said, Marguerite came into the room, as though she was just there, and she came and she looked wonderful, and she said the same thing to grandma, which was, "Please tell my mom to stop grieving. She's okay. Mom's grief is holding her back." And I realized what she was trying to say is her love for my mother was so great that she didn't want to move on till she knew mom would be okay. And that's when I finally understood. And then and then one more time, another visit, I had a dream of her. And this dream, I was half awake, half asleep, that kind of twilight. And she came into my room, and there she was light filled and looked beautiful, and just said goodbye. And that was kind of it. But those experiences, and again, in my teen years at that point, um, those were hard to understand or to find a me too with, because there just wasn't. So I felt very um, isolated and a little scared and didn't know how or what to do with these things that were happening or how I was able to have them happen. So, but that was a very unusual experience with that. And then, it just went on throughout the years where, people would say, "Oh, we've got a ghost," and I could sense it. And things like that. And just, I always pray for peace. I always said peace thoughts. And it's like going, before it was popular, I'd say go into the light, go into the love. Just be in the love, because anybody who's still hanging around for any reason is usually here because they're looking for love, and they didn't get into that vibrational energy of love. So, so nowadays when I have those senses of beings around, it's not as frequent. Spent a lifetime of trying to keep the shields up to protect myself as well. But anytime I sense a spiritual energy like that around, I just always ask that it go into love, even if it's a relative. If there's a message that I need to hear, or something coming through, I will pass it on. And I've done that many times with friends who've lost loved ones. And even something as casual as being out to lunch with friends. I had a luncheon with a friend who had lost her son, and we're having salad and having a normal conversation. Next thing I know, I'm seeing the image of her son sitting right next to her. Okay, so this is this is happening right in the restaurant. Again, daylight. It's not like I have to go into a trance or anything. And so I knew her well enough to be able to tell her that I had an impression of her son being right there with her. And he shared a few things. And so I checked those out with her, and I said, "Here's what he's saying." And I told her he's showing up as he's telling me something about the Pillsbury Doughboy, and he's laughing. And she started laughing because that was a joke that they used to do. And there was no way I would know that, but that was a way of him letting her know that he was around. And that was one of his character things. I'd never met her son. So, but I described what he looked like as I was perceiving him. And I also said he has an incredible sense of humor, and he wants you to know he's really okay, and he wants you to be okay. And then, we're in the middle of the restaurant. She starts crying, of course. And I'm like overwhelmed too. But, and then poof, he was gone. And, but that happens a lot. And I don't have any control over it. I don't seek it out. I don't try to summon spirits. I never do any of those things. But if they pop up and pop in, then I recognize that there's a spiritual responsibility to share what I'm perceiving in an honest way, and see how I can offer it in a way that's healing for both sides.
That's a beautiful gift, but I can see how it would be terrifying for a 16-year-old or even younger. I think it started
Hmm.
for you even younger
Oh
when
yeah.
you had never heard of this before. Even if you had heard of it, it's still a very unique and different experience and I can see that it would be scary. So you've learned to live with it. You've got your shields up. Can you reach out to the other side if you want to, or is it just a one-way communication?
It's not one way. That's the thing, and that was the thing I didn't realize, with the near-death experience I had as a child, because there weren't any filters as a child and no preconceived notions, nothing. For whatever reason, the channel to stay open to the other side, I can't even call it the other side, it's just there. It's not there's no division. Um, so it's always open. And yes, but these days, my filter is I always say in my prayers, only the highest and best, most sacred and holy energy. I don't want any connection with anything that is not. Now, that's a very big difference between a spirit that might be troubled versus one that's not of good energy. There's the whole, and just as there are different types of people in this world, there are different type of spiritual energies around that we, can or can't perceive based on our abilities. So I just try to pray for discernment and protection at all times. And the same with when I'm with people. And to your question about, the communication pathway being, both sides, it's just always open. That's why there's no need for me to go into any kind of trance state or whatever. I mean, and just like I could explain how I could see my uncle with my mind's eye or see my body on the bottom of the pool with my mind's eye, it's the same thing. As I'm seeing you, I could see a spiritual energy pop in next to you if indeed that happened. And I'm seeing it with this eye while my physical eyes are seeing you. It's very hard to describe that difference, but it's just as real and natural to me. I made a joke about it one time. I said, well, it's no different than me just doing I crunch numbers and do spreadsheets. I'm a total research nerd and I love all of that. So I can be crunching numbers and see a spirit pop up. It's no separation, none. It's not like I have to do anything, meditate, get in any particular state. It's just it just became integrated.
Were you born and raised in a spiritual or a religious household?
No, not necessarily. Now, um, my grandmother on my mom's side, as I said, was Pennsylvania Dutch, and I came to learn that they had a whole healing folk community practice called powwowing or brocare, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch healing method. Well, I never knew anything about that. I later learned that my great grandmother was a powwow midwife and healer, and my grandfather was Native American, and he always called me his little powwow. So I felt like, and so they were pretty accepting of me because they were also very open to things, even back in the 60s and 70s. Grandma used to have experiences where um, she learned of a family member's death because her bedroom door would open and close 3 times. Or there'd be a knock on the door 3 times, and Pennsylvania Dutch 3 is the magic number. But they did go to church. I'd go to church with them. I loved being in a house of God or worship or whatever being you can call it. I didn't have a word for the love. I just call it love. Because it's not about a religion necessarily. Religion to me is just the practice and observance of how you go about trying to experience this love or whatever. But I did grow up with that, and I always wanted to be in some sort of um, church, and it did not matter what it was. The religion itself did not matter. I just wanted to be in a place where I could feel there was a dedicated place to be in that spiritual space. So I always felt that call when I was about 17, 16, 17. I ended up, mom took me to a Pentecostal church. Well, they speak in tongues, baptized in the Holy Spirit. Um, so I did all that, but I was like, well, I didn't feel anything different because I'd always been able to do that anyway. And I had this language, and I thought, well, maybe it is a Pentecostal language, and which is one of the reasons I went too, because I was curious. And then I realized that the language I had sounded like a real language as opposed to what I might be hearing in these settings. And I said, well, there's a difference in how the sound is. I later had this recording. I made a recording of the language I knew and sent it to Dr. Ian Stevenson at UVA back in the day, and he actually sent it on to this language department. They said it was ancient Toltec. Well, I always thought that was very interesting. Not that I understand ancient Toltec, but there's, of course, then you think, okay, now you think about reincarnation. What does that mean? Is there some sort of soul language that I retained from a previous life? Is that valid? Like I said, I'm a researcher at heart, so I always sought to understand these things that happened. Um, and I always want to make sense of things, but I didn't question them. They happened, but how did they happen? Why did they happen? How was I able to perceive it? What did it mean? What was I supposed to do with this? And I recognized the theme kept popping up. Everything always was toward healing and helping others. What could I do that was going to help my fellow human in this world? Um, and even with the knowledge that I had there, I had to learn how to um, put a filter on what I was, perceiving, because sometimes you just can't blurt out what you perceive if it's not pleasant or whatever. And I learned that from a young age. That was the other thing too. I always thought everybody was the same. I always thought everybody had these abilities. I didn't realize that they didn't, until I was, again, a little older, and I would say things and kids started treating me like I was a freak, or I had some kids call me a witch, and I was ostracized. And I remember just feeling a sense of shame, and that I had to hide who I was. Um, and I became a very quiet, a very shy, very introverted child. And I was kind of shy anyway, but it became more so. I just didn't really talk to anybody, um, because I didn't know how to relate to a lot of the things that kids liked. It just didn't appeal to me, and I didn't know who was safe to talk to. So, we didn't use words like emotional safety back then, but it wasn't an emotionally safe place for a child who had all these abilities, in a world where, kids wanted to play with Barbie. I just wasn't interested. I was like trying to understand, the big questions even at that age. But I remember even like my best friend when we were 9 or so, we were in the same age, and she told me her parents were going to move away, and she was moving and this and that. And she had said something, and the information flashed that her parents were going to get a divorce, but she didn't know that yet. So I just, but I didn't realize that she didn't know for sure. And I just said, "Oh, your parents are getting a divorce," and her eyes got huge, and she's like, "No, no, of course not. What? Why would you say that?" She's And I said, "Oh, I'm trying to backpedal even at like that age, because I was like, why did I say that? I mean, just blurted out what popped in my head." Well, they did move, and the following year they did get a divorce. But she and we're Facebook friends now after 50 some years. And you know, um, it's just always been interesting to me that just, I've had to learn to keep my mouth shut a lot of times. And it's not like I see negative things for people. I try hard not to. I try to focus only on the positives. Um, but like I said, I'm a truth teller too. I'm not going to sugarcoat things, and I'm not going to not be honest with folks. If I sense something is not in someone's best interest, or that there might be a problem coming, I'm going to just to share that, but in a way that's ethical, responsible, and gentle. Because I don't think it's ethical or right to frighten people. And I've also learned that everyone has free will, and what I may be perceiving in that moment can change. I consider it like a fabric, and it ripples and moves and shifts and changes moment by moment. There's some things, this was the thing I always wanted to understand the difference between free will and destiny. As I was like, well, if everything's destined and meant to be, then we really don't have any free will. We're just kind of walking along, right? Just waiting for everything that's destined to happen. But there is something along that line. There is both and free will and destiny. There are some events that, like a hanger where you can hang your clothes in life, that are going to happen. But there's some things that you might be able to change the wardrobe. And I've never quite understood what those things are that are more fluid and what things are more rigid. But I guess that's where we have to answer, why are we here? What are we here to learn? What are we here to do and be? What are we here to contribute? And I think when we get really clear about those questions within ourselves, the types of experiences that come to us can only contribute to our soul's growth, no matter how they show up. So I've had to try to distill a lot of learning, and I'm trying to share that as much as I can with you and the folks listening. Um, you know, spirituality is so individual and complicated, but it's also pretty simple too.
And you spoke kind of about having a mentality or an urge almost of service to give back to others, to help other people. And that seems to be a theme with near death experiencers. I see that a lot. They always come back with some sort of mission to help others. Not always, but a lot of the times. Do you feel like you were given this near death experience as a gift to kind of open you up to these abilities so that you could help others in the special way that you can?
Thank you for asking that question that way, Tia. I mean, for a long time, I never saw it as a gift. I didn't, in fact, I didn't feel comfortable. I wanted to be normal, which meant maybe not have these abilities. But I now do see it as a gift. I think I mentioned to you earlier before we started the call that, I'd always felt like I had walked in two worlds in this life, like I had to hide. Even to this day, I always worry that, someone's going to find this out about me and then they're going to judge me as being woo woo or whatever label they want to put on it. But when I had that eureka moment with PMH Atwater's sh- helping me to understand that being 4 years old, why that was so different to have an NDE at that age. Then when I look back through the lens and then being this age now that I am, there's a certain freedom with it. I know that, like I said, I have no doubt on the other side that there's nothing but love and compassion and care. And I do feel that there are two main things I'd like to be doing more of, and that is normalizing these experiences, because more and more people are having near death experiences because of technology and interventions that bring people back from life that we didn't have before. So with the advent of, you know, defibrillators and all these types of equipment that can sustain life and bring people back, people are having all these types of things, and now we can talk about it more freely. It's a way to, something opens the mind. You can say it's a neurological change that happens in the brain that alters perception, kind of like a radio wave tuning, that you now have that wave open to. Whatever it is, it is a gift now, and I do see it that way. But I also see it as an enormous responsibility, like I said, because when you're given a gift, it's to be given away and to help others with it. And so that's why I try really hard to make a difference in, like I said, in normalizing things, but to keep a message of love going. And I don't mean love in the clingy way that most people assume love. I'm talking about the spiritual agape type of love that is so enormous and huge. And I'd like to share a little bit about that when I talk about how I met the person who I'm now married to. And my second near death experience, not for mine, but sharing in someone else's. That was something very different.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Okay. And if you don't mind a shameless plug here, I did write this book called We Met on the Other Side. And that is about this shared near death experience. And I wrote the book because so much had happened that led up to all of that, that people keep asking questions. I thought it's easier just to put it in a written format that they can refer to. Um, so bottom line is I met this man, David, who is now my husband. But I didn't know him at the time, and I ended up doing Reiki healing with him. Now, back story a little bit. I have two sons who had some special needs, and I learned Reiki to try to help them with what was going on in their lives and to try to soothe them and to try to help them heal with these things. So I'd gotten my Reiki certification and it gave me a way. I didn't want to be a nurse. I wasn't really called to that, but anyway, I heard about this man, David, through some friends that I knew, and I go into the details in the program in the book about the fact that, um, I went through a very dark period in my life with my sons and all the overwhelming needs of being a single parent with kids with special needs. And I was worried that I was drinking too much. So I took myself to some 12-step meetings and I met some really lovely people there. Well, what happened was I heard from one of my friends there about this man that they knew who was dying in the hospital, who had some sudden onset disease. They didn't know what was going on, but he had gone into multi-system organ failure. His kidneys had shut down, his lungs had shut down, his heart was out of rhythm. He had sepsis, he had double pneumonia, he had um, blood clots. He had all these, his lung collapse. He had a chest tube and he was now in an unresponsive coma and he wasn't expected to live. He was only 42 years old. And there was like, they finally found out that he had been diagnosed with a very rare form of vasculitis. And at that time, it was called Wegener's granulomatosis. And basically, what that is that the veins and that fuel the organs, little nodules get in. And so his kidneys had been destroyed by these nodules that had developed, and everything had shut down. So he didn't respond to the treatment protocol. Well, his mother flew in to say goodbye, and she had been there 3 times, and the hospital called her that day. And a friend of mine had told me about what was going on. So I met his mother at a meeting that night. And she was standing there telling everyone, thanking them for all that had happened. Her son had been there 3.5 weeks now. He had not recovered. He had never regained consciousness. And she had signed the funeral directives that day. And so it was one of those moments where, something comes out of your mouth, but your head isn't going along with it, but the mouth anyway. I went up to her, something about her really touched my heart. And I thought, well, I'm a mom too. If my son were dying in another state, because she had flown in all the way from California to Virginia to say goodbye. And that day, and I kind of want someone to maybe be there with them too. And so I offered to go in and do Reiki and to do a prayer. I was on a prayer team at a church, a local Unity church. And I thought, well, if nothing else, having been on the other side, if he's hovering in a coma state, he's probably out of his body, ready to go. Um, at least I can maybe pray with him and let him know it's okay to go. So she would have to give me permission because he was in the ICU at the hospital. But what I said to her was, I don't think you should give up hope yet. So she's looking at me and I'm like, oh my God, why did I say this? Because she just said, he had gone downhill. She had done the funeral directives and they did not expect him to make it through the night. But I ended up going. And when I walked in the room, I had never met him. I didn't know him. I just knew what I'd heard about him. And from all the people crying and his mom, I could see that he was a pretty good guy. And I was like, this is really sad. And so I asked his permission mentally to work with him and knowing that he might not want that. It was his right to ask to accept help or not. I didn't have the right to foist it on him. And I've learned that in healing. But I asked his permission. I told him who I was. My mother had always said, even when people are in a coma, assume that they're awake and talk to them like they are. So I introduced myself because we hadn't met. I told him my name and why I was there. And I told him, I met your mom and all these other folks that I know too. And I said, we haven't met, but I'm here because a lot of people love you. And, and I just wanted to come and offer some healing if you would like it. And, I'll wait and see if it's okay. So I felt a little puff of air And I knew that that was his spiritual energy letting me know it was okay to do some Reiki with him. So I did, but I took his hand and did the Reiki work. And I wasn't feeling a whole lot of energy except a lot of sadness and sorrow. And I told him, I spoke to him out loud, and I said a prayer out loud for his healing and recovery. But I also said, if you are going to go, then know that you're loved, and know that there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing you could have ever done that you aren't loved. And but if you want to go, then go in peace. But if you're going to come back and you need to fight, then I will make a commitment that I will come back for and help you. It's your choice. So I went home that night wondering why I'm doing that. At this point in my life, Tia, I'm still a single parent. I'm in graduate school full time in my doctoral program in public policy. And I've gone ahead and got my master's in public health also to learn how to research more to help my children. And I was teaching a marriage and family relationships class in addition to being a student. So I just come out from teaching my class to go to the hospital with and work with him. Well, he survived that day, and I went back because I said I would. And now I barely had gas to put in my car to go to the hospital, but I was like, why am I doing this? I've never worked with anyone that critically ill. This man's ready to go at any second. And so, I mean, even his catheter bag was bone dry. His kidneys were just not producing. It was just, everything was just awful, physically for him. But when I went back and I worked with him for several days, and then I had that experience of being out of my body. He had still not awoken from the coma. He had a little tiny bit of response coming back with a little bit of kidney function showing up, but they said with the level of destruction, he might have a little bit come back, but they would never heal because kidneys don't regenerate. So so I took his hand and I began the usual prayer that I said about thanking our highest and best and the God of our understanding. He's Jewish, I'm not, so I want to be respectful of his religion. And again, only ask for the highest and best energies in this world and any other. And to this day, I don't know why I said that phrase, but it's what came out of my mouth. Um, and then I had that shift of consciousness. Then I'm out of my body and I'm in a place of this love, just like I was when I had my near death experience at 4, but it was different. This time there were pinpoints of light, like just millions of bright white light. And there his spirit was. And his spirit was hovering because he had not yet gone. In many near-death experiences, you hear about someone going immediately to the light or whatever. But when people are in a coma, they didn't have a catastrophic death moment. They're hovering. They're truly near death. So he was still hovering outside his body in the light, but not yet going fully forward because he hadn't died fully. So that's when I knew he had a full choice. He was still hovering, and then when I had that connection with him, my spirit just totally opened up and I was embraced in this love, and I knew his spirit. I was like, oh my gosh, I love this spirit. I love this being. I've known this being forever. And that's like how I met him. And I knew he was my soulmate. Now that's kind of a trite term, but it was the best term. I was like, this person is part of my soul. And my soul and the love was so huge that whatever he wanted to do would be okay. And if he wanted to go on, if that's what his soul needed, then love asked me to love him enough to let him go. And if he wanted to come back, then love would say, then how are we going to help him come back to this very damaged body? So, that meeting of the mind, the meeting that we had on that other side, and again, that term may not be the best term, but it's all I can say. I was in a different place in consciousness, just like being out and seeing somewhere else, but I was with him there while he was making the choice between whether he was going to stay or go. And then I'm back and plopped at the bedside, still standing there holding his hand, wondering what happened. What just happened here? You know, this incredible love, awareness, this download of knowledge about his life, and this connection of knowing I love this man. And then I'm just looking at this half dead stranger with tubes in his nose and throat. And the only thing keeping him alive were the machines, the respirator, everything, and the feeding tube, because again, he had not regained consciousness and he still was not responsive. So I'm like, I just could not make sense. How could this be my soulmate that I'm now meeting while he's dying and I don't even know him? And I really didn't even know that much about him. But um, so I'm totally stunned by that. And so I told him, I said, well, here's my prayer. If you want to go, then just go in the love and know that it is just amazing love and you are free to go and everything is fine. But if you decide you want to stick around, then let's see if you can come back whole. And I'm going to pray for your complete and total healing. So when you're asking about religion, I had grown up in churches and there was something that we always said, which was the Lord's Prayer, right? And so I said the Lord's Prayer. And as I said it, there were 7 words that just lit up for me completely. And it was the part, well, let me just say it says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And these are the words on earth as it is in heaven. And then the prayer goes on. But those 7 words on earth as it is, not was, will be, could be, as it is in heaven. And I was like, heaven meaning another realm. I thought, in another realm, he is whole, he is well, he is healed and complete. And so if it is true, as it is in heaven, that he is that way, then I'm going to claim that it is that way on earth. And there was spiritual energy coming out of my hands, spiritual energy then coming from him. It was almost like a figure 8 of energy. It's hard to describe. But he began to have a miraculous healing. I worked with him for 12 days. We had some very unusual experiences where I had a perception of these beings from another dimension. As I said, when I said the words in this realm or in this world or any other, this realm or any other, I saw beings that appeared to my eyes as being blue, but I saw them from my room in his hospital room, again, using this eye to see things. And they replaced in a holographic way, energetically, his kidneys. So I remember that experience, again, questioning everything, like, what am I perceiving? Never had that happen before. And I went in the hospital the next day and his kidney function started to ramp up. And the doctor came in and they said, well, I don't know what's going on here, but the kidney function's really starting to climb, which can't happen with kidneys that are destroyed at this level. Now we have all the medical records and documentation. Anyway, David returned to consciousness. And then over the next 7 days, his healing just exponentially increased and his kidney function kept ramping up day by day by day. And the nurses and doctors were calling him Miracle Boy. And he was in a Catholic hospital here in Richmond. And so they're just like, how is this happening? Nobody knows what's happening. They're just like, oh my gosh, and he made a stunning recovery. And he was still very weak and very sick when he got out of the hospital, but the fact that his kidneys had returned to full function, that he lived and that he wasn't permanently disabled, which was probably what was going to happen if he had if he'd just come back without anything. If he even lived, he would be permanently disabled. But he wasn't. He did lose hearing in one ear from the nerve damage that happened prior to that. So we're still not quite sure about that, but I told him it's kind of a convenience factor now because he can say when he didn't hear me, well, but that's what happened. And here's the funny part too, is he was still a stranger to me. Here our spirits had met on the other side, but he didn't have a conscious memory of it. But he said when he woke up, he knew everything about me. He knew he was going to marry me. He knew my life's pains and sorrows. He just didn't even know my name because we hadn't met. And even though I told him he was still in a deep coma and he had not retained it. So anyway, so now we're having to meet this way. And it was so awkward and strange. And then he's sick and half dead. And I'm like, he's on the mend for sure, but he was not my checklist of people I wanted for my soulmate. Well, again, you never know what is going to work out, but I had been alone for a long time at that point, and, and I just had kind of given up. I was focused on being a mom, my schoolwork, and, again, he was the last person I would have expected to be someone I'd have a partnership with, but he did make that stunning recovery, um, and then we just knew that we were meant to be together. So 6 months later, we were married, and that's been over 18 years, ago. We just had our 18-year anniversary or wedding anniversary, but we're going on year 19. His, recovery was so dramatic. It was on the TV show The Unexplained in the first season, hosted by William Shatner. Now, they only focused on the blue beings, and it was a short clip, but that's why I wrote the book too, was, I did a second edition to explain about the show, because the show said that I claimed to be a great healer, and I have never done that. That's just not the truth, and I'm not comfortable at all with that. I believe the healing energy comes to me from the universe, and I'm somehow able to transmit it to people if they want it. But everybody has a soul purpose. And so it's not like I can go in and help facilitate someone's healing if they don't want it, or if their soul has a different plan. I've had to learn a lot of things with healing, and also with working with him, it took a lot out of me. So, but anyway, that's how we met. There's a huge love story with all of this. And, and so when I try to share what I've learned from all these very huge experiences that I've just assimilated into my life, and half the time just shrug off when other people are, oh my gosh, what? Or having to set the record straight. I'm not one for drama. I just don't believe in that. And as I said, I'm a researcher at heart. So I want to try to understand these experiences and help others have them, because I believe we all can. I honestly, even though I had my near death experience and I do believe it opened the door to greater gifts, I think many of these things are teachable because we're talking about shifts in consciousness, and the power of the spoken word, the power of a loving intention, um, combined with that sense of love from the other side, which we all can access in some way by either spiritually transformative experience or just being open to it. I believe by facilitating that with other people, that real healing miracles can occur. So I also know that people can choose to go. David could have gone. He could have chosen to leave because his body at that point was damaged so badly. And and we didn't know each other in this life, but he made a U-turn. He came back. And we have had an amazing life together. We've had a blended family. We've watched our children grow. We've got 4 grandsons now. We've had, all the struggles that couples do, with work and family and money and just trying to balance everything. But we're both committed to being of service in this life and to using the experience and sharing it. We didn't talk about it for over 10 years. We didn't want to, because it was not only deeply personal, it was also so fantastical in my mind that I was like, oh my gosh, how can you even relate this? What happened? Um, but I call what we have a shared near death experience. And someone recently was asking me about, well, are you sure about that? And I said, well, here's the thing. There's now a whole group of researchers doing shared death experiences. And I said, so again, when this happened with David, that term wasn't even around and this kind of research wasn't really being done. But people are completely conscious or sitting with a dying person who can be a loved one and doesn't have to be, but can be. And the person dies, and next thing they're experiencing part of the death process with them. They're out of their body on the another side with their person who has died. And when they come back from this, they're stunned. What happened? So I say it was like that. So there is a benchmark, if you will, of ways to look at this experience. It's not really all that unusual. It's just I think we're all more spiritually capable than we give ourselves credit for. And I'm really dedicated to trying to help people to understand that they have a healer within, Nobody is really a healer. I mean, we're all facilitators. We're all here to help each other, um, have a better life and find that place of love and acceptance that we all hunger for. And that's one of the things I want to continue to do. I said the reason, as I said, that I wrote this second edition, it's the same as Waking Up to Love, pretty much, except it's got so much more with the doctor's review of the records and for credibility, which is important to me. Uh, I just want people to really have the facts of the story to understand the dedication, the prayers I used, I put those in there, resources if they're grieving, hurting in life, if things aren't going well, how can you help them to heal these emotional things that are happening? And like I said, I'm not a great healer, but what I am, I do have a gift, I believe, for facilitating healing. And because of the show, I've gotten thousands of requests for going on 5 years all over the world for healing. And that's because the show made the claim that I said I was, but I'm not. So I always feel bad about that. But I always tell people I pray for them. Anybody who reaches out to me, I will always be praying for them, whether I can get back to them or not. I'd be on my computer all day. I often cannot respond to folks. It's too much, but I do pray every night and every day for anybody who reaches out to me. And I've gotten people who reached out and been not real pleasant. I just pray for them too. I just figure they're having a journey and they need help, or they're angry that I didn't get back to them. I understand, but I can't. I'm just one person. But that's why I wrote the book, to help them. You don't make much money on a book. You probably know that. So it's not that. It's to help. Um, so that's the gift, is to be able to give a little bit of hope, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of understanding that, we all are going to die at some point, all of us. We just don't know the when, or the how, but we do know that we will. And if I could leave people with that kind of message, that there is nothing but love there, there's nothing but love. And we are all loved. And if we could just understand how huge the love on that side is, and just even bring a tiny fraction back and be more generous, more compassionate, more caring with one another, that would be the real gift. That would be the transformation that I believe these types of experiences are really trying to help us to do, to be, to share. Um, Otherwise, what's the point? You know, what are we here for?
That is an amazing love story, Scarlett. Cannot, uh, I can't even fathom what you were going through during this time period where I'm sure your heart was hoping that he was going to choose to stay.
Mhm. But I had to honor if he chose not to. And that's what love is, right? Love wants what's best for that person, even if it doesn't include you. And that's what it's all about. Is it's not a selfish kind of thing. It's true love. And that's why I call it a true love story, because that's what true love does. It really wants the best for the other person.
Where can my viewers find your book or find you if they wanted to reach out?
I do have my website. It's my name, the www.scarlettheinbuch.com. On that is a link to Amazon, or Barnes Noble, wherever. I think it's Amazon. They can get the book there. There's a contact form on the website, even if they just want, prayer, and they want to send a prayer or ask for it. I will, if even can't get back to them, they can be assured that if they've done something, I'm going to be praying. I am thinking about teaching. All that's going to be on my website. So my website's the best place to go. If they just want the book, that is on Amazon in Kindle, as well as a paperback. So, and again, the book was written, the prayers that I use for David, I put in there verbatim, and people have told me that they feel the energy of it and have used them with some striking results. So, and I've gone on and done some other healing things with other people that I'm thinking about just writing some more about too, after I get some permission from folks to make sure it's okay to share their stories. So the power of healing love is just stunning to me. Um, but the common denominator with all the folks that I've had these experiences with where they made a stunning medical miraculous, if you will, recovery, have been where they've been hovering between life and death. And I attribute that right back to my own near death experience where I was hovering between life and death. And I think that is particularly, it took me years to finally realize that that might be why I have more of a gift of effect with folks who are in that state. They're usually completely unconscious. They're getting ready to go, and they usually have some sort of catastrophic thing going on. And whatever happens in that divine moment of time with them in between that healing space seems to be where we can connect. And that's my prayer always. If you want to come back whole. And if you don't, go in the love. And, and that's respecting a spiritual choice as well as just being a witness and a participant to an incredible sacred gift of being there for another human being in such a sacred moment of life and death.
You have such a beautiful gift, and thank you for sharing that with others, to helping others to heal, and helping others to realize that death is not the end. That is so important, such an important message, such important work that you're doing, and I appreciate your contribution. Thank you so much, Scarlett, for being my guest. This has been a real honor for me. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Tia. It's been a real honor for me to be with you today, and I hope whatever I've shared helps your listeners. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.